Breaking, unprecedented crisis engulfs the White House as federal courts isolate the president tonight. America witnesses a constitutional earthquake. The West Wing, the command center of global power, has ground to a halt. Communications severed, advisors expelled, and President Donald Trump finds himself in unprecedented isolation. This is not political theater. This is the American system engaging its most severe safeguards. Within the past 48 hours, a cascade of extraordinary events has unfolded that political analysts once deemed impossible. A federal judge's midnight emergency order has triggered an institutional lockdown of staggering scope, cutting the president off from his most trusted confidants and plunging the Capitol into uncharted constitutional territory. What started as a classified legal proceeding has exploded into a full paralysis of executive function. The emergency injunction issued under cover of darkness by a D.C. Circuit judge imposes sweeping constraints justified as essential to national security and judicial integrity. The court directive mandates that President Trump immediately terminate all contact, whether direct or through intermediaries, with a list of advisors now formally classified as potential witnesses or co-conspirators in a widening federal probe. Names that once defined Trump's power circle have become legally untouchable. Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, Jared Kushner. These figures, who once wielded influence from within the Oval Office itself, are now prohibited from entering White House grounds, making phone calls, sending texts, or communicating through third parties. The barrier surrounding the president has materialized from political rhetoric into enforceable reality. This order emerged from crisis proceedings triggered by bombshell whistleblower revelations leaked to media outlets. The testimony alleges a clandestine decision-making apparatus operating outside official government structures. According to these disclosures, key advisors allegedly orchestrated policy manipulation, financial schemes, and foreign communications beyond legitimate oversight. The judge's order warns of imminent threats to Justice Department investigations, stating bluntly that continued presidential contact with implicated individuals could fatally undermine evidence integrity. The court's language carries unmistakable finality. Inside 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, chaos erupted instantly. Trump's attorneys filed emergency appeals throughout the day, each rejected with stunning rapidity. By midnight, enforcement commenced. By sunrise, Secret Service agents and federal monitors had repositioned throughout the West Wing. Access rosters were rewritten. Communications now route through surveilled channels. Advisors attempting entry were summarily turned away. Staffers arriving for work encountered a building transformed, its familiar cadence replaced by eerie dysfunction. Scheduled meetings evaporated, briefings were scrapped, the press room stands vacant, its microphone silent as if governance itself has frozen. This paralysis extends far beyond symbolism, its operational reality. The West Wing limps forward at minimal capacity, its decision-making apparatus strangled by legal restrictions. Emails accumulate unanswered, policy documents remain unsigned, telephones ring into void, personnel wander hallways uncertain of who holds authority or whether today's decisions will survive tomorrow's legal scrutiny. One official described the environment as claustrophobic, a building full of movement with nowhere to go. This is what institutional collapse looks like, not through electoral defeat or legislative override, but through judicial enforcement. Beyond the gates, Washington vibrates with anxiety. Journalists mass at the perimeter, cameras fixed on dimly illuminated windows where sources say the president paces in solitude. His characteristic flood of late-night social media posts has ceased, silenced by investigation-related legal constraints. Insiders describe fury, bewilderment, and mounting claustrophobia. Trump, whose leadership style revolves around instinct and personal relationships, now confronts procedural barriers impervious to persuasion. The courtroom has supplanted the campaign rally. Legal statutes have replaced political slogans. What makes this crisis so destabilizing isn't merely its severity, it's what the order signifies. The judiciary is declaring unequivocally that presidential power has boundaries. The ruling explicitly accuses the administration of deliberate obstruction and warns that any violation triggers immediate contempt charges. The threatened consequences are extraordinary. Asset seizures, account freezes, criminal prosecution of intermediaries, federal marshals on alert. These aren't hypothetical warnings. They're the sound of constitutional safeguards engaging with full force. As news spreads, repercussions cascade outward with remarkable velocity. Trade negotiations freeze, infrastructure initiatives stall, lower-level officials scramble to fill leadership voids, only to discover their delegated authority is provisional and limited. The West Wing, once projected as an impregnable fortress of executive will, now resembles a sealed chamber, its occupants awaiting instructions that cannot legally arrive. Power hasn't merely diminished, it has been interrupted. The political response reveals everything through what remains unsaid. Republican leadership offers carefully calibrated statements emphasizing procedural neutrality over partisan loyalty. Phrases like, "If allegations prove accurate and due process must prevail," replace the reflexive defenses of previous controversies. This conspicuous absence of immediate support from party leadership speaks more powerfully than any official statement. Behind closed doors, strategists reportedly draft contingency scenarios, calculating the political cost of proximity to a presidency under siege. This marks the inflection point where self-preservation overrides ideology. Allies measure distance. Support becomes transactional. Language shifts. The atmosphere chills. We're witnessing not simply legal combat, but the initial phase of political abandonment, the quiet recalibration that occurs when power appears to be crumbling. No one wants proximity when the collapse comes. And as darkness again descends on Washington, the West Wing remains trapped in limbo. Lights burn late in offices with no announcements to make. The building stands physically intact, yet functionally inert, a monument to stalled authority. The question haunting the Capitol is no longer whether this crisis is genuine, but how far it will extend. Because once the system activates enforcement protocols, reversal becomes extraordinarily difficult. And this time it's moving with unmistakable purpose. The legal avalanche unleashed by the emergency order accelerates with mechanical inevitability, transcending symbolic gestures into automatic consequences. Contempt provisions embedded in federal law activate instantly upon detection of prohibited communication, eliminating discretion and mandating enforcement. Compliance is no longer voluntary. It's the sole path avoiding escalation. Any circumvention attempt through intermediaries, encrypted platforms, or informal channels triggers immediate penalties not only for senders but for anyone facilitating transmission. This explains the unnatural silence pervading the White House. It's mandated, not chosen. The system isn't negotiating, it's containing. Behind the scenes, institutions coordinate with rare unanimity. The Justice Department, FBI, and court-appointed monitors operate in synchronized precision, suggesting extensive preparation. Emergency appeals from presidential attorneys meet dismissal in language leaving minimal ambiguity. Higher courts decline intervention, citing the order's purportedly narrow scope and temporary duration, despite its expanding hourly impact. Legal strategy has pivoted from aggressive counteroffensive to damage containment, from overturning rulings to managing fallout. That strategic retreat alone speaks volumes. Within the administration, morale has brittled. Personnel accustomed to intuitive action now await written directives that arrive slowly, if ever. Acting deputies attempt crisis management, but their authority remains constrained by the same legal uncertainty enveloping the president. Every decision faces risk assessment. Every action undergoes second guessing. The apparatus that once operated at breakneck velocity now crawls, its mechanisms grinding under uncertainty's weight. The phrase most frequently whispered in corridors isn't defiance, it's exposure. Leaks intensify. Not dramatic disclosures, but methodical releases of damaging minutiae. Anonymous sources paint an administration disintegrating internally, confidence evaporating as legal walls contract. These revelations further erode public trust, reinforcing narratives of collapse immune to spin. The information ecosystem splinters into parallel realities, each faction consuming different versions of events, yet both sensing fundamental shifts beneath them. The escalation isolation brings predictable responses. Loyal surrogates beyond immediate blast radius issue defiant statements promising counterattacks and vowing resistance. Emergency filings appear in sympathetic jurisdictions seeking relief that never materializes. Inside the executive branch, holdovers attempt asserting authority through internal memoranda, but their directives carry negligible weight without full presidential backing. Enforcement has momentum now, and momentum resists interruption. International reactions flood in, initially cautious, then increasingly apprehensive. Allies issue measured statements emphasizing stability while quietly pressing diplomatic channels for reassurance. Adversaries observe with barely concealed interest, their state media amplifying images of American dysfunction. The global strategic landscape doesn't pause for domestic crises, and rivals begin probing for advantages where certainty once deterred them. This is how power vacuums announce themselves, not through alarms, but through opportunistic movement. As hours extend into days, the political terrain shifts decisively. Former allies begin hedging openly, praising historical achievements while distancing from present turmoil. Party leaders convene privately, weighing loyalty against survival. Internal polling circulates showing erosion among independents and fatigue within the base. The calculus transforms. Unconditional defense no longer appears strategically sound. Silence becomes tactics. The implications radiate outward. Markets respond with nervous volatility, investors pricing prolonged gridlock. Federal agencies decelerate non-essential operations, wary of decisions potentially subject to future challenge. Governors assert autonomy, filling perceived gaps with state-level initiatives. The center cannot hold because the center cannot communicate. In its absence, fragmented authority emerges, each actor improvising within their jurisdictional boundaries. Inside the Oval Office, isolation acquires psychological dimensions. Deprived of real-time counsel, the president oscillates between fury and contemplation. Handwritten notes replace rapid-fire directives, but many never leave the room, stalled by legal review or uncertainty about who can execute them. The familiar cycle of influence, feedback, and escalation has vanished. What persists is a solitary figure confronting power's limits without the buffer of loyal intermediaries. The isolation's second day exposes previously invisible fractures. Barred advisors begin repositioning themselves, their public statements meticulously crafted to preserve options. Language softens, commitments blur. One by one, pillars of unwavering loyalty reveal hairline cracks. Attorneys counsel distance. Silence becomes protection. The orbit once revolving tightly around the president begins drifting, each satellite calculating independent trajectory. Encrypted messaging threads go dark. Group calls once running past midnight now sit empty. The chilling effect is absolute. Even inadvertent contact risks triggering consequences. No one volunteers to be the test case. The result? A White House operating in slow motion, its characteristic energy replaced by anxious quiet. Public reaction polarizes further. Supporters flood social platforms accusing judicial overreach and conspiracy, organizing rallies demonstrating solidarity. Opponents frame the moment as overdue accountability, a long-awaited assertion that no office transcends law. The divide hardens, facts contested in real time, each faction convinced the other misreads unfolding history. Law enforcement in the Capitol heightens readiness, anticipating demonstrations potentially escalating to confrontation. Intelligence agencies quietly review continuity protocols, mindful that foreign actors may exploit the distraction. Cyber defenses strengthen, monitoring intensifies. Miscalculation risk rises, not from intent but from distraction and delay. By day 3, containment yields to acceleration. Appellate courts uphold the ruling in language offering minimal hope for swift relief. A final appeal looms, but expectations are tempered. Even sympathetic observers concede intervention appears unlikely. The legal machinery grinds forward, indifferent to politics, propelled by procedure. Within Congress, whispers amplify. Drafts circulate. Committees prepare. The word impeachment re-enters conversation, not as rhetoric, but as contingency. No one commits publicly, but infrastructure is quietly reassembled, ready if events demand. One move now forces the next, each step narrowing possible outcomes. Public opinion shifts measurably. Approval ratings decline, driven less by scandal than perceived governing incapacity. The base remains energized, but cracks appear in turnout and enthusiasm. Fatigue settles in. The endless crisis loses shock value, replaced by dull anxiety about what follows. The betrayal narrative solidifies. Reports emerge of former insiders cooperating with investigators, trading silence for security. The myth of unbreakable loyalty dissolves under legal pressure. Survival eclipses allegiance. The threat once suppressing dissent loses force when the system itself appears aligned against the presidency. International institutions monitor closely. NATO briefs members on contingency scenarios. The UN tracks potential diplomatic fallout. Partners question reliability. Credibility erodes, not catastrophically, but persistently. Each unanswered call, each delayed decision chips away at decades-built confidence. As night falls again, the White House glows against the darkened city, a familiar silhouette imbued with unfamiliar stillness. Emergency lights flicker in empty corridors. The building stands as both symbol and warning. Power, once constrained, doesn't rebound easily. This is no longer a story about one individual or one ruling. It's a stress test of constitutional architecture, a live demonstration of checks and balances under maximum strain. The system reveals resilience in its capacity to act and fragility in the disruption that action causes. Both truths coexist. Three paths remain: compliance resolving the crisis through legal finality, prolonged paralysis eroding legitimacy through inertia, or historic confrontation redrawing executive authority boundaries. None return to the status quo. Each carries consequences echoing long after this moment fades from headlines. Trust between branches, already strained, may require generations to rebuild. Precedents established now will shape how future presidents govern, how courts intervene, how institutions defend themselves when norms collapse. The West Wing, once unquestioned center of global influence, now serves as cautionary emblem. The situation isn't stabilizing, it's accelerating. Enforcement tightens, options narrow, and the crisis unfolds in full view of a nation and world forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Even the most powerful office can be humbled when the institutions designed to check it finally act.